So, this is just going to be a fantastic episode. This is going to be about photographic memory and the Deadball era, right? So, you basically have a cutoff period, so to speak, where photography ceases to be the dominant form of memory and myth making in American culture and global culture, right? Which is obviously the advent and proliferation of the moving image. Um, some people would say, right, that's the onset of television, but I would actually say it's the onset of film and cinema, right? So it's actually a little earlier, right? We're looking more at the 20s and 30s. So photography really, as a medium and a technique and a technology, has a very brief period of time in which I want to say it's even like a 40 or 50-year window. But when you look at the advent of photojournalism, and really when photojournalism becomes incredibly mainstream, the technology's there and it's available, um, to when the moving image becomes instituted at a wide scale, even in terms of cinema, notwithstanding television. Um, you're looking really more at the exact dead ball window, which is fascinating. And specifically, again, I go 1909 to 1916, but you can make a really strong case for 1905, 1906 to 20 mid 20s, really. Um, but I'll say kind of 1900 to 1920, and it's just a really really beautiful use case to talk about media and the concept of photographic memory. Because when you're looking historically at the wide sweep of history, there's very little image memory that exists in the so-called data banks of humanity. You have paintings, you have lithographs, you have woodcuts, right? The Harper's Weekly woodcuts that I mentioned earlier in the 1800s. You have lithography, right? Even the use of mass widespread use of lithography in the 1800s for posters and prints to distribute images. I wrote a lot about this in a essay on the T3s as a combination between taking the idea of the cabinet card and combining it with mass produced lithography by way of like handmade painting. Really fascinating, innovative fine art objects. But it's not really what this is about. This is about photographic memory. So this image to me is a great example. This is from 1916. Dick Hoblitzel hits the first, uh, hits a triple that ends up becoming the first run of the 1916 World Series. Um, this moment for me is a really great example of how photographic memory becomes constituted. This is a field level shot, right? I mean, this is just a couple of feet away from the action of Hoblitzel touching third and rounding the bag and checking to see where the ball is. The third baseman's holding his hand up. He's saying there's no play. Umpire's running towards the play. You can see in the background very full stands, right? This is at the Boston Braves field, um, game one of the World Series. This is what remains of this period, which is just so fascinating about the World War I era and early media technology. The acceleration of photography and photojournalism as media objects, right, in the way that images circulated during this period of time, directly coincides with the rapid acceleration of globalization of information, and obviously World War One plays a huge part in that. That globalizes the world, right? Again, First World War. All of this occurs within a very narrow span, and photography is one of the primary methods of documentation. I mean, some of the first photojournalism is from the Civil War, right? It's to bear this in mind, the combination between war and sport, they're so entangled and so entwined. Um, the call for baseball imagery is never higher than after the 1909 World Series, the during and after the matchup between Cobb and Wagner, right? I mean, the two best in the game. obviously an epic World Series, right? And this is a stage that is set for the 1910s and some of these matchups. I mean, the 8-game 1912 World Series, the Miracle Braves. There's a lot of history there and a lot of kind of myth, these epic frames of these kind of gladiatorial battles occurring in these early American coliseums. And I'm using this language very deliberately because this really is what we're talking about. We're talking about the civilizational mythology and the theaters that defined early modern America. And so when we look at an image like this, we are looking at a window, and that window is so specifically uh, perspectively oriented, right? Perspectival, I guess, is a great term. Um, that we're looking at this very limited window that we have, and we're attempting to um, reconcile the image with the larger cultural and social context, even of the game itself, right? If you think of the stadium as a theater, we're trying to envision and gain perspective in an environment which otherwise we are not gifted that, right? For a lot of the modern broadcasts, you get these large zoom outs of the stadium. I mean, these are all recorded and logged to video. They can be watched digitally, purchased, etc. What we're looking at when we look through the window of the photograph and through photographic memory is something that is lost to time with this rare exception of a perspective-based shot. There's usually very few of these. I think they're more common in the World Series, right? I mean, obviously, there's a lot more press coverage. But if you're trying to reclaim the essence of baseball, right, you're looking at spring training, you're looking at day in and day out, you're looking at practices, you're trying to gain perspective of the characters of the players themselves. And there's a large, the word is for there's a deep kind of rootedness to the entire character of the sport at the time. So photographs are a window towards that, but we ultimately lose. And what's so great about this, right? There's the motion, the heads are turned, the umpire's face is kind of veiled by shadow, and there's this deep black shadow on the ground, right? I mean, obviously that's a combination of the sun and the awning of the stadium itself. You are called into relationship with history in such a way that you're trying to understand by filling in the blanks. And we talked about this in the last video about Cy Young and Satchel Paige, about what is absent and what is present. And this aspect of Deadball Era photography really does beg the question of how photographic memory allows us to see and what we are able to see through the photograph. Because, I mean, beyond this, when we're looking at the Deadball Era, there are letters, there are contracts, there's various different documents, maybe uniform purchases, photographs of game action, off-field stuff. But you have a limited window to try to surmise not only the character of the game itself at the time, but of the figures that were defining it and shaping it. And I think Hoblitzel is a great example. Very, very rich Deadball Era figure. Played a huge part in these mid-10s Red Sox teams. And had a pretty significant career. I think, if I remember correctly, he retired and became a full-time dentist. He was going to like dentist school while he was playing in some of these Red Sox World Series. Part of their infield with Jack Barry this year. It's these things that it's a window, but it's a question of how you meet the window, right? A lot of these photographs can be very standardized, maybe a raised perspective looking down at third base and there's a play going on there. That's very field limited. It's very field specific and field limited. So sometimes I'll look and I'll see what can I find something with the stands? Can I find something with signs, or can I find something that shows me the city? Because this is such a context rich period of time. and we're working with fragments. It's like stitching together fragments to create the whole multi-dimensional picture to capture the full richness of this time. And this is again, this is something that is very time frame limited in human history. You have the period between the institution of the photograph, the beginning of mass photojournalism. Then you have the start of cinema, right? Wire photography is also kind of meshed in that, where images are put through wires. Their quality and photographic consistency is altered. And then you have television, right? This is a very small window where photography kind of takes the place historically of painting and drawing and etching as ways to communicate reality or depict life. And photography comes obviously much closer to being a true window than anything else, even if it is limited to the photographer or the photojournalist's perspective. This is a Brown Brothers photo. There's a fair bit of different kind of photojournalistic agencies that were active at the time: Thompson, Bain, Van Oyen. It becomes a huge industry, and obviously for good reason, because it's illuminating the structure of reality in a way that hitherto had not been possible. And through the cultural export of baseball, um, you're gaining insight in real time to the formation of the largest cultural export in American history, the most important, perhaps. I mean, you could say Hollywood is larger. You'd probably be right. The most important, most richly grounded national heritage in American history. You're witnessing it in real time, in its formation, in its like nascency to maturity, really in the span of 1900 to 1920. And you're watching it historically in this way that has never before been possible through the lens of photography, right? And these photographs are obviously translated into newspapers, they're translated into magazines, they're translated into pictorials, right? Inserts into the New York Times, what have you. So for the first time in human history, you're getting insight, right? Again, World War One. I have a couple of pictorials that have the Black Sox right alongside of World War One news. You're having documentation of something that otherwise could not be seen unless it was experienced through first-person perspective. And obviously, this photograph is a great example of on-the-field first-person perspective that would transmit this game from Boston to California, right? And this is an artifact that, unlike obviously film and television, this remains in hard copy form, right? This is a document. It's something that's time sealed and time limited, and it's a single object. It's not a series of frames. So it's what is what is the Deadball Era, so to speak, is a tapestry woven with photography and illuminated by the historical documents, which kind of timeline or historically map the different events that occurred therein, such as the Federal League documents, transmissions, photographic agencies staging their preparations for the World Series, uniform orders, these kinds of things. So we're looking for the full-bodied richness of the era, and none of these pieces can be discounted. And this is what's so important about the Deadball Era, is they're all physical. This is all physical, paper-based documentation. Obviously, you could include bats or gloves, what have you, and that's obviously a popular choice for Smithsonian or Baseball Hall of Fame. And I would say it's a really important and interesting project for me to conduct, because this is very open terrain, and it's interesting how it's open terrain, because this has already come to pass. This is something that's happened, but it has never been recovered or fully recollected in such a way, right? We would like to say we know the Deadball Era, but every so often, I would say pretty regularly, I see a photograph such as the Addie Joss Day photograph with all of the players seated and looking into the camera, as well as there's a panorama of the players lined up. You get an illumination into the real time-based historical fabric of the era, which goes far beyond anecdotes, statistics, as well as in documents and letters. It's easy to say that you know these things, but they are revealed to you through the literal artifactual presence of the historical documents, which in sum are the tapestry of illumination, which is the era itself. And this is very particular to Deadball, right? Because it starts to expand. The forms of media become faster and more multifarious. Obviously with video, you gain more. If that makes sense, you gain more information, but I think sometimes in gaining more information, you actually lose something essential. You lose the essence. It's easy to lose that thread. So when you're working with pictures and still images, you can start to piece together and understand exactly how things were formed, what caused their formation, and how those progressions kind of interwove and functioned in real time. This is more of like a deep model of historical excavation, which is a very rich and open terrain. So kind of what we're discussing here, this photograph is a great example of photographic memory and how it functions, especially because it's so multifaceted. It's not just the game action, it's the stands, it's the stadium. You're gifted a window into multiple different dimensions of what's unfolding and how. I showed you that Shibe Park crowd photo in one of the earlier episodes, and that's a great example. But you're ultimately looking at something that's so compound and complex that, pretty difficult, if not impossible, to know it all in a very intimate and comprehensive way. We can gesture towards the idea of Deadball, what it signified and what it did, but you have these kinds of surprise encounters with the image, which are very, very profound. Sometimes, if not always, entirely unexpected, that add another kind of sedimentary level to the ground, the historical ground that you're dealing with, and ultimately enrich your perspective. I've had that experience with photographs and with documents, as well as with baseball cards. The E90-1s are a great example of that to me, the printing and production method and the strangeness of the designs. T3s and T206s are also obviously very notable. You get a sense for the communal atmosphere that was present in these cities, the importance of baseball as a unifying aspect in these cities, and ultimately how industry functioned alongside the growth and development of baseball teams as a community-based culture. Obviously, something you could think about, but to experience it, let's say, for instance, in Pittsburgh with a 1910 Tip Top Bread card when the Pirates won the 1909 World Series. That's a local bread production company. That's who printed these cards. That's why it's region specific and it's team specific. You also have that with the E90-2 for the Chicago teams. You're looking at a very different fabric of existence, which was primary communal, regional, industrial, and very site specific. Obviously, this is the Red Sox and Brooklyn playing in the 1916 World Series, but they're using the Braves Stadium because it had more space. They could fit more volume of people into the stadium, so that's why they made that decision. You have a lot of that stuff happening with stadiums. Obviously, the Cubs took over Wrigley Field from the Federal League team after the Federal League shut down, right? That's what becomes Wrigley Field in the Chicago Cubs. So very complex. We'll get into this more, but this is just kind of an introduction to photographic memory and how it functions, why it's important, and we're kind of stitching together the entire tapestry of the Deadball era in real time. Good talking with you. I'll catch you on the next one.